Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I have a question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where lying and deception seemed like the only way out? I want to share a personal story about a time when my husband and I faced a moral dilemma. It was a situation where fear could have driven us to take matters into our own hands, but instead, God was calling us to trust Him completely. In a previous video, I talked about trusting God when making big decisions that don't involve sin. If you haven't watched it, definitely check it out. But what about the situations where the right choice seems costly? Times when we feel pressured to lie or deceive to avoid a difficult consequence. Today, I want to encourage you. Honoring God is always worth it, even when it comes at a cost. For months, we had been searching for a new home. Finally, we found the perfect one. Everything was falling into place. We already owned a two-family house and we listed it just days before making an offer on the new one. The buying and the selling process, both processes were moving along perfectly in sync, and it felt like God had aligned everything perfectly. We were so grateful and so excited. We were just days from closing on both homes when we received unexpected news. Our buyer had not been cleared to close. At first, we were reassured that it was a minor delay. The buyer just needed to submit some additional paperwork and it would be fine. But as time passed, there were no clear answers. The closing date for our old home was getting pushed back, and no one could tell us when or even if it would actually go through. Meanwhile, the date for the home that we were purchasing was fast approaching. Although we had planned to sell our old house before buying, we were prepared to move forward with the purchase, even if the timing didn't line up perfectly and we ended up with two mortgages. At least that's what we thought. Then an email conversation between our attorneys changed everything. It was mentioned in the email that we were in the process of selling our home and that the closing date was delayed. So we needed to change the date or the closing date of the home we were purchasing. The seller's attorney was furious. You see, we had made our offer and signed our contract stating that our purchase was not contingent on selling our home. What we didn't realize, because it was never explained to us, was that once we listed our home for sale, we had to sell it first. Even though we could afford both mortgages for months, the bank would not approve our new mortgage unless our first home was officially sold. This was a huge shock. We had already packed most of our belongings, and now we were at a risk of losing our dream home and also of being sued by the seller for a breach of contract. We were so upset. We were frustrated with our real estate team for not explaining this to us. And we were frustrated with ourselves also for not asking more questions. But I think more than that, I felt ashamed. The sellers team seemed to think that we had purposely misled them, and that was definitely not the case. I was embarrassed of being in that situation. But in the middle of all this uncertainty, God was working in our hearts. Through this, He revealed how much I had placed my hope in finding the perfect house. I had convinced myself, without even realizing, that this home could somehow bring me contentment. And my husband was able to see how much he feared the financial loss and how much of his identity was tied up to being a good provider. We had to surrender these fears to God. We had to remind ourselves that God is in control and that He is good and that He is with us. And even if we lost the opportunity to buy the house or we faced a lawsuit, He was still faithful. On a Tuesday afternoon, when discussing the situation with someone over the phone, the person mentioned to me a possible solution. They said, if the buyer's loan didn't go through, we could still get approved for a mortgage if we enlisted our old house and said to the bank that we would be keeping the property as an investment. The idea was to get friends or family to say that they would be moving into the apartments as tenants and creating false rental agreements. So we would be lying to get the deal done. We never actually looked into this and how it would even work, but apparently people have done this and have gotten away with it. But by God's grace, we knew immediately that this was not an option for us. We couldn't compromise our integrity no matter what. And this person's suggestion during that call, it led to a half-hour conversation about faith and about trust in God. And as I spoke, I realized that God was using this situation not only to strengthen my faith and my husband's, but also to be a testimony to those around us. I kid you not, less than 2 hours later, we got the call. Our buyer was approved. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday evening, we had finished packing and moved out of our home. On Friday, we closed on both homes. God had worked everything out. We had spent days fearing the worst, yet God had orchestrated everything behind the scenes. But what if the outcome had been different? God would have still been faithful. As I explained to the person on that call, my ability to say no to that option was not because I knew without a doubt that God would give us the result we wanted. My ability to resist that temptation was also not because I was so holy and better than the people who have used that strategy. The difference was that I could look back at my life and see all the ways that God had carried me through tough times. I could look back and see God's faithfulness. I knew that I could trust Him. It didn't remove the fears, but it gave me the courage to be obedient. Even if we had lost the house or faced a lawsuit, God would have carried us through it. His goal was never for us to just get into a dream home. God's goal is to make us more like Jesus. And this experience reminded us that the Christian life isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about trusting God through the hardship when it comes. In a previous video, I talked about Jesus being our good shepherd. Psalm 23 also tells us that though we may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we fear no evil, for He is with us. His rod and His staff comfort us. We can trust that God will see us through every challenge. When we wrestle with the temptation to take the easy way out, we have to remind ourselves of the greatest act of obedience in history, and that's Jesus' obedience to the Father. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He faced the ultimate test. He could have chosen an easier way, but instead, He surrendered to God's will, choosing the cross for our sake. His sacrifice reminds us that obedience is often costly, but it's always worth it. We don't follow God just to get good outcomes. We follow Him because He is good. We obey not out of fear, but out of love and gratitude for what Jesus has already done. Because of the gospel, we don't have to panic when things seem to fall apart. We can trust that God is working through all things and it's for our good, even when we don't see it. If you're facing a tough decision, I want to encourage you, do what honors God. Glorify Him with your life. Make that the priority. You can trust Him with the outcome. He may not always give you exactly what you want, but He will always give you what is best for your soul. Even when obedience is costly, Jesus is worth it. Are you facing a tough decision? I want to encourage you, do what honors God. Glorify Him with your life. Make that your priority. You can trust Him. He may not always give you what you want, but He will give you what is best for you and what is best for your soul. Even when obedience is costly, Jesus is worth it. And by the way, we ended up selling our house for $150,000 above asking price. And God used the process of listing our house to strengthen our faith as well. If you'd like to hear that story, let me know in the comments. And if the story encouraged you, please like it and share it with a friend, someone who might need to hear this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.